This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 85 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about a topic that's really close to my heart. It's about kids and their understanding of culture, and in fact I'm titling this episode Cross-Cultural Kids because I have stories from three amazing sets of parents and all about the things that they've done with their kids and the kids who've grown up in a really cross-cultural way. So before I get to that, I want to say a huge welcome back and thank you to Boy Eats World as the sponsor of this episode. So boyeatsworld.com.au is a fabulous travel website and blog. It's just a beautiful blog about travel, culture, kids and food and all the way these things intersect. And it's written by Elaine de Winter with assistance from her hilariously cool son, Raph, who's currently 9, soon to be 10, I think. He's the boy of the blog's name, and he's often accompanied by his 6-year-old sister, Sugarpuff. They have all kinds of adventures abroad and at home here in Australia too. So over the years, I have read many travel blogs, but Boy Eats World is one that I always go back to. It's always beautifully written, gorgeous photos, and importantly for me, Elaine and her family share my beliefs on how important it is to give kids the opportunity to experience different parts of the world, and that's something we'll talk about more in today's episode. So Boy Eats World is definitely full of excellent stories and advice for travelling with kids, and some of my very favourite parts are when Elaine turns the tables and lets the kids talk. So for example, I'll leave a link in the show notes to one of my favourite posts, which includes a video of Raph giving kids 15 tips for travelling with parents. So actually, I'm never going to show my son that post, but it is really well worth a read and a look. There's also plenty of more serious but also highly readable, useful tips for taking kids in your travels. So if you're in any doubt about the value of taking kids when you travel, Boy Eats World will also convince you the way I hope to as well. So thank you again so much, Elaine, for your support of the podcast, and to everyone listening, I highly recommend you head over to boyeatsworld.com.au for some great reading. So now on to this cross-cultural kids topic. So in my case, my 7-year-old, he's only lived in Australia, but he has been very lucky to travel a lot to different continents and to have lots of cross-cultural influences. So his father is German, and of course I am pretty obsessed with travel and cultural differences and all kinds of stuff. So I think all of these influences around him has made him extremely open to new ways of life in other places. But my first guest today, first guests, plural, is Elizabeth and Jeff Newcamp from the blog Dutch Goose. And they have taken this much more seriously because they have their 3 young kids with them at the moment living in the Netherlands. So they have some really interesting stories to tell about how their kids have fitted into life in the Netherlands.
Well, we've made plenty of mistakes here, but our biggest tip for the listeners is this. If you're going to live abroad and you're raising children abroad, you need to be part of the country. You need to get in place, act like you live here, don't act like a tourist, and embody everything. Eat the food, have neighbors and friends who are from that country, attend the same schools, if you can, of the host population, and experience it. Live in the country. Try not to be a guest in the country, but be part of the country. And that has led us to a lot of success.
Yeah, I think we just really found that by making some small choices, like when we got here, we knew that most people rode their bikes everywhere. So we got bikes and we just committed to biking everywhere, which put us kind of on par with everyone we're living with. I mean, everybody has a car and they do drive places, but that put us more on the same schedule in terms of like, okay, we're going to shop at the market because we're on our bikes and that's what's convenient. And we're going to go to the grocery store a couple of days a week because we have a small, fridge and a small bike. And then we opted to put our kids in local school, our neighborhood school, which is they speak Dutch.
Cool.
Our now 5-year-old took to that so well and is fluent, and our 3-year-old we're starting to see the stages of fluency come. He does this kind of pretend Dutch where he makes all the Dutch sounds
Cute.
with American words, and that's something we had seen with our oldest as well.
Oh, gorgeous.
But we found that because the kids are in local schools, then we have Dutch friends too. We have expat friends, and we have a great expat community.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things that we can only get from them because, the Dutch people are at home and don't understand necessarily our feeling of like, well, we're at home here, but we have this other home. So we get that from the expats. But having the kids in Dutch schools means our parent friends are Dutch. We're celebrating the Dutch holidays with our kids who are celebrating the Dutch holidays. It makes us much more, I think, part of the community, which makes things a little bit easier for us. We don't feel as much like we're far away because we've become part of the community here. There are still moments where we are like the Americans. But
of course.
There's a lot of times too where we are just the neighbors. And I think that is nice and gives you this sense of that you belong here as well.
One of the funny things, Elizabeth, I would say that has happened with language here is that we've taken a few flights from Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and we have had the same flight attendant a few times now.
Yeah.
And this must be rare because we're not flying to the same city over and over again. But this older female flight attendant befriended us on the first flight we took with her and quickly realized that our 5-year-old speaks Dutch, but we do not.
Oh,
yeah.
And so every time we see her on a flight now, she'll come and have little sneaky giggles with our 5-year-old.
Oh, cute.
Sim things. And then she says, "Oh, he ordered it,"
knowing that we can't hear the conversation.
Hysterical. So funny.
Oh, that's gorgeous. How sweet of her.
Yeah. It's a really special. And she always recognizes that. I mean, we recognize her now, but she's always like, "How many families with 3 little boys are, where the one speaks Dutch and the parents don't?" So
who would bring 3 little boys with them on a flight?
Exactly.
It sounds like a disaster.
It does I will say it, the language thing has presented some problems in the play dates. Our play dates are really big here. Like the kids go home several days a week with other kids.
Oh,
our 5-year-olds right now.
5-year-olds at a play date now. And so he can go to their house just fine. He speaks Dutch. But when we have the kids here,
that's a bit tricky.
Yeah, we understand the Dutch, but to rely on your 5-year-old to translate or Google Translate.
She will only eat chocolate.
Yeah,
wait a minute.
That is exactly how things go.
He said his mother told him that he can have.
We do okay, but
we didn't do okay. The birthday party. We had a birthday party for the 5-year-old when he turned 5, and so we had 7 Dutch children at the birthday party.
Yeah, and the day before the party, Jeff and I are like, so we luckily, one of our lovely Dutch mother neighbor friends came to the party as well.
Oh, good. So you had some assistance.
Yeah. I mean, we had done it at a nature center, so there were people there, like, leading the activities.
Oh, good.
But we thought, like, we have no way to tell these kids, everybody come back. I mean, we know some Dutch, but not enough to navigate that situation. Yeah. So we encounter lots of little things like that, just with raising the kids here. And also, I think, a balancing of the cultures. They have Sinterklaas here, who comes early, like in late November on a boat. And I don't know if you've read about it, but he comes with this Zwarte Piet, who is this black character. And there's a lot of questions about that, how it should be perceived. And the Dutch here very much feel that it's part of their culture, but as an American, it all seems very offensive. Those sort of things are sort of difficult because we've said we want to be part of this and
we want our children to attend these events with their friends.
Of course, yes, just to fit in, like as though they're Dutch kids, yeah.
But we also have this kind of responsibility as, I think, Americans looking in and saying, like, hey, this might be why it's not so sensitive. I think on both, like, explaining to the Dutch why we think people are offended by this or why we feel offended by it, you know. So navigating that is tricky, I think. And that was something I didn't really anticipate coming here, that there would be those kind of cultural clashes.
Yes, and it does get trickier when there's kids involved, doesn't it? Because, they just take it for granted, whatever they learn from their friends at school or even their teachers at school,
Right.
that's just how it is, because that's what when you're told something when you're a little kid, you just believe it. So
that's right.
That's quite tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's fine here, and it works, but we're going to relocate eventually, and we take our children to another environment, and they will bring those experiences with them, or prejudices, or whatever it might be. And that's when it becomes hazardous. Yes,
that can get very tricky. I can imagine. That's. I remember I interviewed a originally British blogger, Jo Castro. She was on the podcast. Oh, I'm not even sure if it's come out yet. But she and her husband's a geologist, and they've moved. They've lived in, I think, 8 or 9 different countries, and their kids are now in their 20s. But yeah, she was saying that a lot of the things that they would learn from one country, then they would move to the next one and have to kind of relearn how to discuss things. And yeah, there was kind of a lot of cultural adaptations that had to keep taking place, and it was quite tricky for kids to deal with all that. But.
Yeah, I mean, we've noticed there's, on a kind of less sticky subject, but the overall Dutch way of dealing with things is very confrontational, just to say what you think and don't be offended, which we have come to really appreciate living here. But we can already see our kids have kind of adapted that, because that's the way things are dealt with in schools. And it's little things like, when they invite kids to birthday parties, they hand out the invitations at school
in front of
everybody.
Oh, whereas we're very careful to only give it quietly to the mum so the kids don't see. Yeah,
exactly. Like here, the kind of standard is that you invite the same number of people as age you're turning.
Oh, yeah.
So parties are usually just 3 or 4, 5 kids, right?
Mm-hmm. So not the whole class. Yeah.
Yeah. Our child is not at all offended by the handing out in front, because he's used that. That is just, to him, that's what happens. No one is offended that they're not invited.
Okay.
And in fact, you can not be invited to a birthday party and have a play date at that kid's house the next day, because it's not an indication of
that you're the top tier friend. Yeah,
that you have to make this. Now, to us as parents, we're always like, oh, he didn't get invited to this birthday party, because that's the culture that we grew up in.
Yes.
And to him, it is literally nothing.
Yeah.
But also, when we look at going back, it's like we will have to navigate that time in which we're now in the States having a birthday party, and he can't just go in and say, well, you 5 are coming with me.
And the rest of you aren't.
He doesn't know that hurts people's feelings, because here it doesn't hurt people's feelings. But it's just not something they're conditioned. Same with a game on the playground. Like, there's a lot of, well, this group is playing this game, and for whatever reason, you can't play, But that's not offensive here. That's just how, if the game requires 4 people, there's 4 people that play and everybody else doesn't play.
Right.
That's
yeah.
So just
that would be interesting.
Whereas they always say the Americans are like fake nice. We try to make everything right, and we're fake nice. And,
we're a bit like that here too. Yeah.
But it's just a totally different way of doing things.
Yeah, that's right. And there's good and bad of both sides, but you just have to kind of adapt to where you're living. And when you're a kid who doesn't know any different, because you've just grown up in one of the environments, then I can imagine there'll be some tricky situations in the future. But interesting.
Exactly. The upside is, though, when you get a compliment here, you know that it's true. You feel like, because they don't come very often, but when they come, they feel great.
Oh, yes. I lived in Germany for a few years, and I think it's pretty similar. So, you really earn those positives. I love that Jeff and Elizabeth's kids are having such an amazing experience by being so involved in life, in everyday life in the Netherlands. And what an interesting experience they have to kind of start their young lives. We chatted about the Black Peter Dutch Christmas thing, and I found an interesting article about it, which I'll add in the show notes. And I also mentioned that I chatted with Jo Castro about something similar, and you can find that chat, which was about Jo moving around the world with her kids in an expat life, and how that influenced them as they were growing up, because they're now adults. But having talked of Jo already, it's probably no surprise that she has more to say on this topic, and she has this lovely story to tell about when her kids were younger. In fact, her daughter was 5, and, well, I'll let her tell the story. Here it comes.
I could talk endlessly about what I think travel gives to kids, and third culture kids, I think, are very much a thing of the times now, where they don't really know where they come from. Well, they know where they come from, or they were born, but they don't.
Home?
Perhaps, yes, where's home? And there's one rather sad, funny tale when Emma was about 5 years old. We used to try and keep a connectedness with England because Mum was there, my sister was there, and Dave's family were there. So we always wanted them to know where their roots were. But we travelled such a lot, and Mum used to book the pantomime in Barnstable, and she'd get the first row for all the grandchildren. Every year we went back for Christmas, if we got back for Christmas.
Oh, how gorgeous.
And the front row is always the row where the dame of the show picks on the children and invites them to come up to stage.
Of course.
So they did, and he goes down the line. Where are you from? Da 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 da. And he tries to get a laugh out of the kids somehow or other. Mm-hmm. And there's little Emma in her little red dress and little red berry, because we used to dress her up. Poor little thing.
Poor Emma.
And he says, "And where do you come from?" And she looks at him and she shrugs. And of course the whole audience laughs. And he says, No, where do you come from, Emma? And so she shrugs again and she looks at him and she goes, "England." And he goes, "Oh, okay, where in England?" And she shrugs and she looks down at us. Oh, no. And I thought, oh, God, she's going to burst into tears, poor little thing. And then eventually he gets out of her that she thinks she comes from England, but actually she was born in South Africa. So she didn't really know what to say where she came from. She had no idea at the time. And it didn't matter, because we were her security. Wherever we were was home. And right then, home was England, but she wasn't quite sure where.
Oh, that's beautiful, though. And, yeah, it doesn't really matter, does it? If you've got your family, then really doesn't matter. People are home rather than a place.
Absolutely, yes. People are home, and the security that you provide. And yes, I think we were lucky. We were always a very strong little nuclear unit, and the children went out into the world from that very strong base, and they were allowed to explore and integrate and socialise with a vast majority of lots and lots of different people in very many different situations. But they knew that the security was, once at home, was very safe and secure.
Yeah, that's important. Oh no, what a wonderful life they've had. Full of adventures.
Full of adventure, yeah.
I do love this story. Poor little Emma, who couldn't really answer the question of where do you come from. I'm sure now, as an adult, she probably has quite an elaborate answer for it. We'll have to ask her one day. But I love that story from Jo. Now, my final guest today is Christine Knight, and she has also had some experience of having her daughter in another country and talking about how to maintain these cross-cultural connections when you move away.
We were living in Sydney, my husband and I, and my husband got a job offer to move to New York, and it was something that we'd been talking about for quite a while, and I'd always wanted to live in New York, and so we're like, yes, that sounds great. And we found out the same week that he got the job offer that I was pregnant.
Oh wow,
so
it was a big week.
It was a massive week, and we had to decide. It was a startup in New York, and they put a lot of pressure, saying, we really need you to start soon. I need to decide, and I don't know what to do. And I was like, people have babies in New York all the time. We'll be fine. Let's just do it.
The confident approach of a first-time mother.
Exactly. I had no idea what I was doing. It was before I started feeling morning sickness, all that sort of stuff, all that jazz. I made this snap decision in 2 weeks to move to New York.
Wow.
It was insane. And then 8 weeks later, we'd packed up the house. My husband was gone to start his new job, and I was finishing up my job in Sydney and finishing up packing up here, selling the car and things like that before I flew and joined in when I was 3 months pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That was intense.
Yep.
And so then my baby was born in New York, and we lived there until she was almost 3. She had a full American accent. She went to preschool. It was great. We had such a local experience while we were living there. It was great, and that was all she knew. Was New York. The city life was New York. She's such a city kid as a result.
I bet.
And we moved back home, and she still has memories of New York, and we've been back twice since. So not this year, but the last 2 years in a row, we've been back to visit our friends, our old neighborhoods. The last time we went back, it was just before she turned 5, and we'd be walking around Brooklyn, which is where we used to live. And even then, I thought she wouldn't remember anything, but we'd be walking down the street with brownstones. They look pretty identical. And she'd be saying, "Oh, we're near Jules's house, or he lives around the corner, or this is where." I was like, "Yes, we are. That's amazing.
That's so cool."
It was amazing that she'd retained that, and she still remembers lots now, and she's always asking to go back. She misses her friends. She misses the galleries. She really loves visiting, and loved when we lived there too, even though she was so little. So keeping her connection to New York is really important, because that's who she is. She's a dual citizen. She has both passports, and
of course,
so we want to keep that option always open to her, that when she goes back to New York, that's her second home. So we always tell her that. Your home right now is Sydney, but our home was New York, and it's our second home. So we keep in touch with our friends there, with the kids that were in my mother's group. We keep in touch with them. We'll FaceTime the kids sometimes. We send cards to each other. We send little videos to each other, all that sort of stuff to keep the relationships alive with the important people in our lives there. We have heaps of books on New York that we read all the time to remind her of the places and where we used to live. So it's always something that's very fresh, for her, not something that happened in the past, but it's part of who she is. And if you ask her, she will very proudly tell you, I live in Sydney, but I'm from New York.
Oh, wow, good on her. That's excellent. Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And especially because she has the option with the passport to, later on in life, she could choose to live there, which would be great, because then you could just go visit all the time, or move back or maybe move back.
Now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think it's an important part of their identity, isn't it? So it's important to keep it up.
It's not just a birth certificate. It's who she is.
I guess there are more and more kids these days who are in a position like Christine's daughter. They're born in one country, but they might live there for a while. They might move to another. They might eventually get back to at least where their parents consider to be their roots. It's an interesting way to grow up, and I imagine that it's a way that leaves you pretty open-minded to lots of different cultures and different kinds of people, the same way that travelling does, but probably with even more of an impact. I can't say I experienced it myself. I, grew up fairly solidly in Australia with a couple of stints of travel, but nothing serious. And I think it'd be interesting to experience. So anyway, I'm really grateful to all my guests for telling their fabulous stories today about their cross-cultural kids. So thank you to everyone. But a very big thank you, first of all, to our sponsor this week and last week, boyeatsworld.com.au. In the show notes, I've got a link to Raf's 15 tips for travelling with parents, and also Eleni sometimes writes along with the kids he said, she said pieces. So I'm linking to one that's Bali by kids, where you can figure out what the kids really think about going to Bali. So thanks again to boyeatsworld.com.au for their fabulous support and sponsorship of the podcast. So along with that reading, I can also leave you with Elizabeth and Jeff's site Dutch Goose, which is at dutchdutchgoose.com. And I've got a couple of links from chatting to them. That story, I've got one from National Geographic about Zwarte Piet or Black Pete, which we mentioned, and also a link to episode 70, which we talked about. And, of course, the lovely Jo Castro is back. She's got 2 great websites you can check out. Lifestyle50 at lifestyle50.com. That's 50 the word, not the number. and her travel blog Zigazag at zigazag.com. And definitely not least but last on the list today is Christine Knight, and her website is Adventure Baby. You can find her gorgeous blog about kids and travel at christineknight.me. Please also come along and join our Facebook group. We've got lots of new members lately from all around the world. I think in one day I approved new members from Latvia, Mexico and Malaysia. And I thought, wow, this is such an international group. I love it. So we have lots of great chats in there. You can find us by looking for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, or there's a link in the show notes. Of course, these show notes are at notaballerina.com/85. So do look at all of this information up there. Thank you again so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.